The human form of life is like a bubble in water. Really think about that for a second. It's this hauntingly beautiful ancient Vedic proverb, and it absolutely hits the nail on the head when it comes to the fleeting, incredibly fragile nature of our existence. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to dive deep into a fascinating ancient text that tackles this exact existential dread head on.
So let's get right into it. Today, we're decoding an excerpt from the Brahmanda Purana, specifically a really intriguing section called The Limitless Merits of Apara Ekadashi. This text gives us a profound look at an ancient spiritual framework, basically a proposed solution to the heavy, heavy burden of human flaws and karmic debt. It's a totally fascinating look at how ancient societies understood sin, redemption, and, honestly, the ultimate purpose of life itself.
Section 1. A royal request. To really grasp the weight of what we're looking at here, we have to establish the mythological narrative arc. We're dropping in on a deeply philosophical conversation between King Yudhishthira, who is the earnest seeker of knowledge, and Lord Sri Krishna, acting as the ultimate spiritual authority. And notice the incredible specificity of the king's question. He asks, what is the name of the Ekadashi during the dark fortnight of Jyeshtha, and what are its glories? He is asking about a very precise, narrow window of time, basically what we consider the May to June timeframe on our modern calendars. And this specific inquiry perfectly sets up Krishna's expansive, mind-blowing response. And here is Krishna's answer. He defines this specific day as Apara Ekadashi. According to the text, it is an unlimitedly meritorious fast occurring during that dark fortnight of Jyeshtha. Krishna states that this holy day is so sublime, it literally eradicates the greatest sins and even grants universal fame. And it's super important to note how Krishna frames this right out of the gate. He tells the king that his inquiry is wonderful because learning about this specific fast is going to benefit the whole of human society. He's presenting it as a universal cure.
Section 2. Eradicating extreme sins.
Now, this is where the text gets incredibly granular. Just look at the stark contrast in these transgressions. On one hand, we have classical violent sins. We're talking about heavy, heavy spiritual burdens. Killing a brahmana, a cow, or an embryo, or Kshatriya warriors cowardly fleeing a battlefield. But then, we have professional cheats and frauds. The text specifically calls out charlatan astrologers, cheating accountants, false Ayurvedic doctors, and false witnesses. It's kind of wild, right? Human nature really hasn't changed all that much over the centuries. White-collar fraud and professional deception were apparently just as much of a spiritual concern back then as they are for us today.
But the text keeps going, outlining even more of these immense karmic burdens. It claims this single fast completely erases blasphemy, adultery, inventing your own scriptures, and failing the duties of your social order, like, say, posing as a qualified Brahmin when you clearly aren't. It even specifically mentions that a disciple who receives a proper education and then turns around and blasphemes their spiritual master, which, by the way, is considered the absolute ultimate betrayal in this tradition, can still attain the spiritual world simply by observing Apara Ekadashi. It's basically a sweeping spiritual amnesty program.
Section 3. Equaling ultimate pious acts. Okay, so we've looked at the problem of accumulated sins according to the Purana. Now let's look at the sheer scale of the solution and exactly what Apara Ekadashi is compared to. The text lists these incredibly demanding, geographically and temporally restrictive acts of traditional piety. We are talking about bathing at Prayag in the freezing winter month of Magh, serving Lord Shiva at Varanasi during Shivaratri, offering oblations to forefathers at Gaya, bathing in the Gautami River specifically when Jupiter transits Leo, and seeing Lord Badrinath when the sun transits Aquarius. I mean, wow. These aren't just quick weekend trips, right? They require immense dedication, highly precise astrological timing, and severe physical hardship.
And get this, it brings us to a really fascinating detail from the notes regarding Pushkarak Kshetra. This location in western India is noted as literally the only place on earth where a bona fide temple of Lord Brahma is found. The text claims the merit of observing Apara Ekadashi equals the merit of bathing 3 times a day at this specific, incredibly rare location during the month of Kartika. Completing all these traditional pilgrimages would honestly take an absolute lifetime for most people.
So, weigh these massive historical endeavors against each other. On one side, you have extreme acts of piety and immense wealth transfer. Things like bathing during a solar eclipse at Kurukshetra while giving away cows, elephants, and literally gold, or donating a pregnant cow along with gold and fertile land. Historically speaking, these are acts reserved only for kings and the ultra-wealthy. But the alternative? The simple act of fasting on Apara Ekadashi? Krishna's profound claim here is that the spiritual merit is exactly equivalent. It radically democratizes salvation, making the ultimate spiritual payout completely accessible to anyone, regardless of their wealth. Section 4. Metaphors of spiritual destruction. Now, Krishna doesn't just list dry facts here. He uses a rapid-fire sequence of really visceral, poetic metaphors to describe exactly how this day destroys karma. Let's walk through these because they're amazing. First, he describes Apara Ekadashi as an axe that cuts down the fully matured forest full of trees of sinful deeds. Think about the sheer cutting power required for that. He's not talking about little saplings of mistakes here. He's talking about deep-rooted, fully matured wrongdoings that have grown over an entire lifetime. Then, instantly, the imagery shifts to fire. It becomes a forest fire that burns sins as if they were kindling firewood. This really highlights the all-consuming, purifying heat of the fast. It doesn't just chop down the forest, it completely incinerates whatever is left behind. Next up, he compares it to the sun blazing before one's dark misdeeds. This is a brilliant metaphor, contrasting the absolute blinding light of the spiritual fast against the shadows and darkness of human transgressions. And finally, he caps off the sequence with this super intense, visceral image, a lion stalking the meek deer of impiety. It essentially casts the fast as the ultimate apex predator, actively hunting down and devouring spiritual weakness. It's just an aggressive, incredibly powerful cleansing. Section 5. The bubble of material life. Because, well, after all these grand promises of redemption, the Purana unpacks the terrifying alternative. What actually happens if you just ignore all of this? According to the text, the consequence is severe. To ignore this opportunity is to be born again in the material world, described as being like one bubble among millions in a huge body of water, or like a small ant among all other species. And that is the core existential threat of the teaching. Failing to observe the fast means returning to the endless, totally insignificant cycle of reincarnation, completely lost in the massive, overwhelming scale of the universe. So to avoid that, Krishna provides King Yudhishthira with the ultimate solution to escape this cycle entirely. The instructions are simple, but they are strict. Faithfully observe Apara Ekadashi. Worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Trivikrama. By doing this, the text promises that one becomes freed of all sins and is promoted directly to the abode of Lord Vishnu. This effectively closes the mythological narrative arc, offering a crystal-clear path right out of material existence. Now, to really ground this concept in our reality, look at this profound commentary from Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada on that Vedic proverb we started with. He writes, "The great ocean of material nature is tossing with the waves of time, and the so-called living conditioned are something like foaming bubbles in a vain search after permanent living conditions." He's pointing out how our earthly attachments, our wealth, our status, our homes, are ultimately totally impermanent. We spend our entire lives frantically trying to build permanent structures in a tossing ocean. Which brings us to one final thought. Regardless of where you personally stand on the specific rituals of the Brahmanda Purana, the core philosophical challenge it presents is pretty universal. It forces us to confront our own mortality and the impermanence of our worldly pursuits. So the question I'll leave you with today is this. In this tossing ocean of material nature, how are you spending your fleeting bubble of time? Thank you so much for exploring this with me today.